After the major success that was the Avengers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe continued to grow and expand, bringing us into Phase 2. So today we are going to rank all 6 projects that came out of Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 2. Hi, my name is Zach, and I started this YouTube channel because I just cannot watch a movie without needing to talk about it afterwards. And if you find yourself the same way, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. We are currently on a journey going through all of the phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and ranking them. So as I'm talking, join me down in the comments section. Let me know what you guys think of Marvel's Phase 2. How would you rank all 6 projects within Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 2? I've also got Phase 1 up on the channel now, so if you haven't checked that out, that is available to go and get caught up on. With all that out of the way, let's get started with my list at number 6. In last place, Thor: The Dark World. Unironically, my wife's favorite of the Thor movies. And I do think that Thor: The Dark World in some aspects gets a pretty bad rep. For a long time, it was known as being everyone's least favorite Marvel movie, but I've always enjoyed Thor: The Dark World on some level. I don't think it's as good as the first Thor. In fact, it's one of the first Marvel Cinematic Universe movies where you can feel it's kind of directed by committee, as Patty Jenkins was originally on board to direct Thor: The Dark World. She wanted to focus more on the romance between Thor and Jane, but this committee of Marvel businessmen in New York told them they couldn't do that. They wanted to have Hela as the villain. They told them they couldn't do that. So we got Malekith in here, and we've got a pretty watered down generic movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But generic doesn't always mean bad. I do enjoy the Loki and Thor team up in this movie, coming off of the Avengers. Ramifications that Loki has on Thor from the Avengers, I think, plays out very well here. I like going to Asgard more, so getting to spend more time in that realm, which I always found more interesting than the Earth stuff in the first Thor. I always find a lot of fun within that. Unfortunately, though, Thor: The Dark World does have a lot of shortcomings. We've already mentioned the villain of Malekith, who is easily, I still think, the worst villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because this movie literally doesn't really give him a character. He's a dark elf who wants the ether out of Jane, but there really doesn't feel like there's any stakes to what he's trying to accomplish, no matter how many times the movie tries to tell us through exposition. Even the romance here between Thor and Jane, a romance that I admitted to liking quite a bit in the first Thor movie, it really doesn't work here. Natalie Portman, there's reports that she didn't even want to be attached to this movie once Patty Jenkins got pulled off of the project. You can kind of feel that in her performance. The chemistry between her and Chris Hemsworth just isn't the same as it was in the first Thor movie. So while I don't hate Thor: The Dark World by any means, I do find the movie watchable. I just don't watch it all that often, unless my wife wants to. At number 5, Ant-Man. And just to put into context here, there is a bit of a jump from Thor: The Dark World going into Ant-Man. I find this movie very delightful, very enjoyable. Paul Rudd in the role here, he brings the right amount of charm and charisma that you need in a Marvel hero like this. This was originally going to be directed by Edgar Wright, but when it got attached to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Edgar Wright pulled out of the project. They put in Peyton Reed, but they kept a lot of the shrinking sequences that Edgar Wright had already developed, and some of the best parts of this movie are the shrinking sequences where we got Scott in the Ant-Man suit shrunk down to ant size. They're a lot of fun. They're visually dazzling, and the core of this movie being about a father who's just trying to get time back with his daughter is all very sweet. It's got all the right ingredients that Marvel puts in its movies, with its charming cast, its humor, its fun action sequences, but it also does have a lot of the ingredients that makes it feel a little bit bland and stale to the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because there are a lot of elements in Ant-Man that do feel formulaic. The villain here, Yellow Jacket, is very similar to villains we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe already, like Obadiah Stane in Iron-Man, but I find it very sweet, enjoyable. I like Ant-Man quite a bit. Bring us into number 4 is Iron Man 3. Again, another movie that I feel gets a pretty bad rep. And put into context again, another significant jump from Ant-Man to Iron Man 3. I've always enjoyed Iron Man 3. I like the way that the movie transitions us out of the Avengers with Tony Stark, focuses on some of his PTSD that he got from seeing aliens in New York get destroyed by the Chitauri. All the elements of that, I feel, make this a very consistent and natural transition from the Avengers into Iron Man 3. On top of that, I like that this movie focuses on the Tony Stark character. The movie's whole goal is to strip Iron Man of his armor, strip him down to the man that he is, to prove that Iron Man is not a suit, it is Tony Stark. It is his intelligence that is his superpower, not his suits. I like the way that the movie does that throughout the entire film. Even teaming Tony Stark up with a little kid, almost a precursor to Tony's relationship with Peter Parker. I like the way that that relationship develops. I like what it pulls out of Tony Stark, the different sides that we get to see of Tony Stark. And I'm not gonna lie, as someone who doesn't read the comic books, who's not a big comic book reader, I don't think I've ever read an Iron Man comic. The Mandarin twist in this I find hilarious. When Trevor Slattery reveals himself to just be an actor, I don't think I've laughed harder in a theater when I was in middle school when I first saw this movie. I still laugh at it to this day. The big disadvantage that the Mandarin twist does have on this movie, though, is that it gets us stuck with Aldrin Killian as the villain for the remainder of the movie. And I just never found Aldrich Killian, am I even saying his name right? I never really found him that interesting of a villain. Definitely the first half of this movie where they set up the Mandarin being Ben Kingsley's character is more intriguing and interesting than the second half of this movie where it's revealed that Aldrich Killian, who got screwed over by Tony Stark back in the 90s and just wants to get with Pepper Potts, is actually our villain. That's where the movie kind of tumbles and falls apart for me in some ways. But for 80% of Iron Man 3, I love it. At number 3, we've got Avengers Age of Ultron. And I feel like I've said this about every single entry in this Phase 2 ranking, but another Marvel movie that gets a little bit of a bad rep. And I do think that a lot of the bad rep that Age of Ultron has gotten was attributed to the fact that when it was released, it was a very heavy universe movie. As in, there was a lot of setup that was put upon Age of Ultron. It didn't feel like it could just be an Avengers film. It had to set up Thor Ragnarok. It had to set up Civil War. It had to set up where we eventually went with Infinity War. Then thus it has a lot of characters introduced. We got Scarlet Witch, we got Quicksilver, we've got Vision. There's a lot that Avengers Age of Ultron has to do to fulfill its runtime and to further extend the universe for more stories to come. But even with all of that weight that you can clearly feel on top of Age of Ultron, I find this movie to be almost just as enjoyable, if not more enjoyable, than the first Avengers. The story is not as streamlined, it's not as straightforward, and it's not as clean, but the dynamic, the camaraderie between this crew, the actors have clearly grown in their chemistry along with their characters, and thus there's just more fun sequences with the Avengers just hanging out. I think the action here is a huge step up from the first Avengers. Hulk versus Hulkbuster is one of my favorite sequences in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even Ultron as a villain, even though he was kind of marketed to us to be a more threatening, intimidating villain than he ends up being in the movie itself, I still really enjoy Ultron as the character, as the threat going up against the Avengers. If we're looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a television show, which a lot of people akin the universe to when it was around Phase 2, this feels like a pretty big Season 2 finale that's setting up a Season 3 more than it does feel like a standalone movie. But even with all the connections, even with all the tie-ins that do weigh heavily on this movie, I think Joss Whedon was able to pull through just enough that I find Age of Ultron a perfectly enjoyable blockbuster experience. Our runner-up is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy, the first movie in James Gunn's career that set him off on this path of being the guy who brings misfit characters together in a group, pulls them off. Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Creature Commandos. He got his reputation all from Guardians of the Galaxy. And this was a huge risk for Marvel back in the day when they were going to put this movie out. No one knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy was, which is kind of crazy to say because now they're like complete household names. Chris Pratt was a very unknown actor at the time. He came from Parks and Rec, which is also crazy to say because now he's a household name. Star-Lord is beloved. And that is the magic of Guardians of the Galaxy that James Gunn was able to do with these characters, is take these complete unknown characters, infuse his fun, chaotic, crazy energy. The mind of James Gunn is just displayed on the screen, and it feels like something you don't get anywhere else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even when they try to replicate it, even when they try to do it themselves with Thor Ragnarok, for example, it never feels how it feels in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Not only are these characters a ton of fun, not only is the humor top-notch James Gunn humor, but it also has fantastic action sequences. It's such a fun intergalactic story going to this different part of the universe, literally a different universe within this universe, a whole new set of characters. It was so refreshing when it came out back in 2014. It still carries that refreshment to me as I watch through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Every time we get to Guardians of the Galaxy, it's always just a fun time, and I enjoy the heck out of it. But easily at number 1 is going to be Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where they took 2 directors from a sitcom TV directing career and put them on a Marvel Cinematic Universe project and ended up making one of the best superhero movies of all time. Because not only does this movie do so much for Captain America as a character, a lot of people forget that even though Captain America the First Avenger was a modest hit when it came out and the character was liked well enough in the Avengers, no one was really calling Captain America their favorite superhero at the time. Chris Evans was still finding his way through the character, and it wasn't till they got to Captain America Winter Soldier where they took the ideology and everything that Captain America stands for, put it in the modern world, and flipped everything on its head for Steve Rogers as a character. Not just the character of Captain America, but also the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole got completely flipped upside down when they revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually taken over by Hydra. It was such a big revelation in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It left such an impact going forward. It changed the entire way that we viewed the Marvel Universe. And on top of that, they were able to put a skin of a spy espionage from the 70s on the Marvel formula to make this one feel just so unique and different from the rest of the movies that came before. They also expanded Captain America's crew in this movie, getting him in a more deeper connection with Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, who gives one of my favorite performances as Black Widow in Captain America Winter Soldier. She kicks so much butt. And you've also got the new Captain America, soon to be new Captain America, back here. He's just known as the Falcon, Anthony Mackie, in here teaming up with Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson. You got Nick Fury in here, giving him an awesome action sequences, one of the best car chase sequences we've ever seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's so much in Captain America the Winter Soldier that is just peak Marvel at the time. Everything came together at the right time, in the right place, the right cast, the right crew, the right directors who they pulled off of television, put them on this big blockbuster. They went on to do more in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, all because they set a fantastic foundation right here in Captain America Winter Soldier to do so. Still one of Marvel's best films they've ever made, and it is easily my favorite of Phase 2, so it comes in at number 1. Don't forget, if you haven't checked it out yet, I got Marvel Phase 1 ranked as well. You can find it right up there in that playlist, Marvel Rankings, along with Spider-Man and a bunch of other ones. And if you go right down there, you can watch the latest video uploaded onto the channel. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.